presenter is Professor Kim Olthoff from USA. She has been doing all his fellowship and residency in UCLA and then moved to University of Pennsylvania in 1995, and so far she is the chief of liver transplantation surgery in University of Pennsylvania, and she's going to speak about the most difficult points in living donor, which is ethics, so we'll listen to her what she will say.
Good morning. It's really a great honor to be here. It's been a privilege to be part of the Living Donor Study Group since its inception. And certainly it's an honor to be here with all the leaders in transplant here in Vietnam. So I'm glad that the first two talks are focusing on the donor, because I think the rest of the day is mostly focusing on the recipient. So I think we have to remember that it all starts with the donor. One of the vows we take when we become physicians is the Hippocratic Oath, which is above all do no harm, we try to say. But in living donor transplantation, is there a reasonable or acceptable justification for subjecting a healthy person to major liver resection with all its accompanying potential morbidities and possibly even death? Well, obviously in living donor transplantation, we've all decided that yes, there is. But from an ethical and social policy perspective, living donor transplantation in Asia has certainly achieved a greater acceptance than in the United States. So everything I say today, I'm from the West, so everything I say today, my framework and my perspective comes from the West, so it certainly shapes some of my views. But nevertheless, I think despite the differences between the East and the West, I think there are some basic tenets that really should apply worldwide. I think some of the differences comes from this slide. This is a few years old, but it does show the difference between the deceased donors in the West and deceased donors in the East. Now there are more and more deceased donors being done in the East, which is great to see, but I think it's still the vast majority are living donors. And that's why, because of the lack of deceased donors, that's why living donors has really been pushed so much and advanced so much more in the East than in the West. The West first approached the ethics of living donation with this Vancouver Forum, and also tried to include people from the East as well in this international conference that the TTS sponsored. And it tried to look at both the ethics as well as sort of a medical guide to the living donor evaluation. And the essential conclusion of this forum, which invited a bunch of people from all over the world to come, is that it established international ethical and practice principles for living donation. And one of the final conclusions is that live liver donation should only be performed if the risk to the donor is justified by the expectation of an acceptable outcome in the recipient. And there were some major ethical tenets for the donor that were discussed in great detail, and that is informed consent and the autonomy of the donor, and I will focus on those a little bit later. This is sort of the way I look at living donation. We wouldn't be doing it except that we want to optimize the recipient outcome. We want to minimize death on the wait list. We want the recipient to do well. But in doing this, we want to minimize donor risk. And to accomplish this, we want to have complete transparency with the donor. And so we talk about those tenets that Vancouver Forum came up with. Really, patient selection and donor selection are important for those first two. But it's really the donor autonomy and the donor informed consent that really is the focus of full transparency and full information to the donor. So let me go into some of these areas. So first is the donor evaluation and considering some medical and psychosocial considerations. Now there are some basic requirements. On this slide I put what we look at in our center. In the U.S., sort of our age range of 18 to 65 has been used. In our center, we're a little more conservative. We cap at 55. We want to make sure that there's no significant medical history, obviously no diabetes, hypertension that needs to be treated, cancer history, We try to have our donors have a BMI less than 30, although we talked about this at dinner last night, and if they are over 30, we put them on a weight loss regimen. You don't want them to have significant vices, such as significant tobacco or alcohol use, use of illicit drugs or narcotic dependence or things like that, and no significant psychiatric history. But most importantly, they must be able to understand the risks and provide consent to do what we're asking them to do. Now, the medical evaluation includes all the imaging that you just saw in beautiful detail in the previous talk by Dr. Egakami, but it's also medical and surgical evaluation and consultation with a hepatologist and a surgeon. We do extensive blood work. We do cancer screening such as mammography in women and PSAs in men. And then there's the anatomic requirements that you just saw, and I don't have to go into, but it's a very extensive workup. And then as far as labs, you can see this whole list of things that we do. On the left are screening labs when the donor first comes in and presents as a potential donor. On the right are the more extensive evaluation labs when they come back and have decided to be appropriate donors. And once all that's okay and they're scheduled for donation, we actually get more labs in a few days before the transplant, just to make sure nothing's changed for some reason. But also some of this is required by our government, so we show that there's won't be any transmission of any disease to the recipient as well. The bottom line is all these tests are done to look for infectious issues, hereditary diseases, coagulation disorders such as hypercoagulable states that could lead to DVT or hepatic artery thrombosis in the recipient, any cardiovascular disease, and perioperative and long-term risk. And both of these are for both the donor and the recipient outcome. Now, just as important as the medical evaluation is the psychosocial evaluation of the donor. And this is a paper that came out from some researchers in Belgium and the Netherlands from what's called the Ethical, Legal, Psychological Aspects of Transplant, or ELPAC. But actually it's an extensive evaluation of they looked at the literature review of all papers that looked at the psychological evaluation of the donor, and they came up with these 6 areas that you really need to screen. And you can use your psychiatrist or your social worker or your donor advocate to do this, but it's important that you look at all these areas in the donor. One is motivation. What is causing this donor to want to donate, to make sure there's no pressure or coercion from family members or the recipient. Second is personal resources. Do they have the ability to make their own decision, and are they able to cope with this very complex procedure? You want to make sure there's no psychopathology, if there's no specific psychological disorders that could come into play, such as paranoia or depression and things like that. You want to also make sure that they have enough social support and social resources. Do they have enough financial and social support? Is their job, are they allowed to take some time off? Are they able to support themselves during this period of donation? And then they're called ethical and legal factors, which is really, you are asking the donor into some sort of contract that they will continue to follow with the donor hospital for a period of time, if not lifetime, after they've donated, that they will be able to come back. And I think this is very relevant in Asia, where people might come from different countries and things like that to get transplants done, that they are able to be followed long term. And then finally is the ability of that donor to understand the information given to them, that they understand the risk, and that they are able to process what is told to them. So this then leads to ethical considerations for the living donor. And these are the 2 main tenets: informed consent and autonomy, and finally is the benefit to the recipient versus the risk to the donor. With informed consent, there's me trying to talk to a donor, and you try to disclose risk. You want them to comprehend the information that they're told, that they have certain perceptions and expectations, that they understand what your center's outcomes are, as well as, national or international outcomes, and expectations for their follow-up. As far as autonomy, the patient needs to know that this is fully voluntary, that they are legally and mentally competent, that there's no coercion, that they're not being paid for their liver. Now, they might be receiving some sort of support for travel or lost wages or that sort of thing, but they're not literally being paid for that piece of their liver. So one of the most important things to inform the donor about is the potential for complications. This is one of the articles from the A2All group, which we were part of, which is the multi-center study in the United States in living donors. And what this study found in over 760 donors, that almost 40% of donors had some sort of complication. It's true that only 97% of them were very minor, Clevien grade 1 or 2, but 2.8% were significant. They need to know this, that there's the potential for a significant complication or death, and that 95% of the complications resolved by 1 year. This is important for donors to not only hear about, but to understand and comprehend what potential complications they have. And then they also should understand that they will have discomfort and pain. I put this up. This is a recent study also from A2All about pain perception after transplant, and we found that about, we did a survey of 172 of the donors using this very standardized American Pain Society survey, and more than half of them reported some sort of adverse effect to the analgesic treatment for moderate to severe pain that interfered with their functional activity. And we also identified some very distinct pain profiles that were influenced by pre-transplant psychological characteristics. And donors who had more than 1 or 2 pre-donation concerns and or had discouragement of donation from the family or the recipient seemed to have more issues with pain afterwards, which was an interesting finding. So interventions to improve pain control really should consider modifying donor behavioral characteristics if you can do that pre-donation, as well as optimizing pain protocols that the pain community has utilized. But another reason I show this slide is the fact that pain control post-donation is very important. At least one of the donor deaths in the United States, as well as several near misses, have been from narcotic use post-transplant in the early post-operative period. We have to remember that taking out 70% of the liver, you metabolize narcotics less, and it's important that we really have a very careful post-operative pain pathway that we utilize for our donors, and we put a very clear-cut donor pain pathway in place in our institution as far as monitoring and no narcotics and epidurals and things like that in order to prevent some of these complications. Donors also get rehospitalized, and the SRTR, the national database in the United States, showed that about 15% of donors were rehospitalized for some reason in the first year after donation, and donors need to know this. And then finally, what is the risk of donor death? This is one publication from a few years ago which identified 36 deaths internationally. Some were reported in a survey that was sent out. Some were reported in the literature, and then there were 2 additional deaths that were known but not reported in either. This is probably underreporting. We have no idea, but right now the risk of donor death that is quoted to most donors, at least in the United States, we tell them that donor mortality is quoted at about 0.2%. So that's probably roughly what it is. Now, you can talk about informed consent, but are the donors really interesting? So here's me talking to a donor, expecting that the donor's listening to everything I have to say, all those potential complications of things that I just explained. But this is probably what the donor is listening. They don't want to hear. They don't want to hear the complications, or they don't understand the complications. And we actually, a group from Northwestern University in Chicago actually showed this. They interviewed donors after donation, and what they found is that 90% of the donors felt informed, but only 2/3 said they really understood everything that they were told. And when they were asked what did they remember as what were the most potential risks for donation, most recalled being told about death, bile leaks, and infection as the leading risks. And then when they ask what they really want to hear about and what do they want to know, they want to know what the risks are and what their outcome will be, but they also want to know what will their recuperation be. They want to know that they can trust their surgical team. They want more comprehensive information that's actually written in layman's terms that they can understand. So this is important for you as a living donor team to know that this is what the donors are really looking for. Now there's a lot now on social media, and I think this is something that's rapidly changing and can be very, very helpful and a good tool, but it also can be a bad tool. We have, there's this donor app now that is utilized to if you're a recipient, you want to identify a champion to go out and help find a living donor, that's out there. There's all these links that you can see on the right-hand side that have information about how to find a living donor, or if you're a living donor, information for the living donor. But we also have to recognize that there's a lot of false information out there, or as they call it lately, fake news. But the internet is really something that's a great source, but can also be a concern. So I think the international transplant community really should develop some criteria and guidelines on to really promote consistency on what kind of information is out there and available on the internet, so that we can share the same information with all our potential donors. Now just a word about autonomy. This really is important, that the donors have to feel that they are the ones making the decision, that it's voluntary, without coercion. They need to be assured about their freedom to withdraw from donation during the process without within a supportive environment. They need to be assured that whatever medical or other reasons they have for not proceeding with donation will be kept confidential. On the other hand, donor autonomy does not overrule medical judgment and decision making. Now by this I don't mean that donors can say I want to donate no matter what the risk could be, but actually the reverse. That if the donors want to donate, but we feel that it's too risky, we have the right to overrule the donors. And as far as balancing the benefit of the recipient to the risk of the donor, that is a very difficult thing to do. It's a beautiful painting that I actually saw last time I was in Seoul at the Samsung Museum of Art, but it shows that the balance and the conflict that we have in determining which donors are appropriate for which recipients. This has been discussed as the concept of double equipoise, where there's balance between recipient survival and outcome with or without a living donor, and the probability of a donor mortality or donor risk. And there clearly exists an area where there's excessive donor risk, that's in the yellow, and unacceptably low recipient benefit, where we should just say no. I know we'll have some case discussions later on, and this might be an area where we can talk about what is the benefit to the recipient compared to the donor risk. And this is not also there's not without transplant center responsibilities. The center really should provide a lot of education and support. We provide all this list of things for our donors, places for them to stay, social support, and that sort of thing. This is an incredibly important aspect to the donors, which they find greatly very helpful. And then we also have a lot of regulations in the United States, and I'm not quite sure what regulations are in place in other countries, but we actually have this burden of donor reporting, but I see it more as a responsibility, where we have to register all our donors. We have to, the UNOS CMS, which is our medical way to pay for things in the United States sometimes requires that we have specific evaluation, pre-op testing 1 week before. We have to report all perioperative data, our complications, our readmissions, and follow-up forms we have to do out to 2 years, even though we follow them much longer. And we have to report any death or adverse event, and all this is reported publicly to the U.S. government. I have strong feelings about who should perform living donors, and really in the United States, I think it should be where centers are in the greatest need, where there is where's the highest MELD score, so there's less deceased donors. We can try to do more living donors. But in summary, donor safety should always really be the priority. Attention must be focused on assuring transparency and a free and fully informed donor consent. Ethical equipoise in living donor transplantation demands careful assessment and balance of need, donor safety, and chance for a good outcome, both for the donor and the recipient. And living donation should only be performed if the risk to the donor is justified by the expectation of an acceptable outcome in the recipient. So I return to this map at the end, but I think the proper balance achieved between that risk-benefit ratio is affected by where we live, by our societal beliefs, and that affect organ donation, deceased donor availability, and specific recipient and donor characteristics. So what is accepted in Vietnam or in Seoul or in Japan may be different than what's accepted in the United States. However, I think there are basic ethical principles and tenets that we should follow. Thank you. Obviously, Ho Chi Minh on the left, but on the right is Ben Franklin, who was a founding father in Philadelphia, where I'm from. So, any questions?
Thank you, Kim. Yeah. I think there will be some questions from the floor. Oh, I will ask that question, don't worry. Okay, the first question, I have a couple of questions, but if there's nobody from the floor, I have a chance to ask at least a couple of them. How long do you follow the donors, and what's your responsibility for the long term in these donor groups?
So it's a good question. The government asks that we submit forms at least 2 years out. Our center follows them for life, as long as the donor continues to follow. We have them come back for yearly visits. If they live long distance and can't come back, we ask that they go see their doctors and send us their labs. So that's what we have tried as a center to do. It's not mandated, but I think it's important that we try to follow them as long as possible.
One more question. How do you describe donor death? When is operation related? If the donor suicides 3 years later, is it still a donor death, or what is it?
I think, when the A2L reported donor mortality, 2 of those were suicides, very far out. I think if it's a psychological thing, I think you always have to think that it may be related to donation. You have no idea. So I think you should always continue to consider that as a possibility of related to donation, but obviously you can never be sure. So it's hard to say. I think that's a difficult answer.
That's what I think.
Hi. I want to expand on the first question. Maybe you can comment on the Istanbul Declaration, which actually says that the donors have to be followed lifelong. Do you feel it's necessary to do that? If it's not necessary to do that, do we recommend that that declaration needs to be modified? Or the other question is, what do you think about the biliary complication rate in the long term for the donors? Is there any data on any strictures or anything that donors have developed? And maybe if that is high, then there is some...
I think that's something we all worry about. Is there any good data out there? I haven't seen it. Maybe you have. From A12, we don't have any evidence of long-term biliary complications on the donors that have been identified, such as late biliary strictures or things like that. Obviously, some of the earlier donors had bit vial leaks and required stenting and things like that, but I haven't seen any long-term data with a significant number of patients show biliary complications. I'd love to hear from some of the other people in the audience if they have them. As far as the requirement for lifelong following, I think that's a dream and it would be nice. Is it
But is
possible?
it necessary, is what I'm asking. If it is not necessary, why should it be a dream?
Well, do we really know if it's necessary or not? I think until we have data from some of the donors, enough data from enough numbers, from enough donors in enough different parts of the world where we can say that after following them for 5 years, there's no other problems, then I think we can say we don't have to. I think in kidney donation, we continue to follow them very long-term in the United States and have identified some very long-term outcomes, issues with that. Now, kidney donation is different from liver donation. But I think we still should at least continue to follow them for a significant period of time. Lifelong, I don't doubt if we need to do that.
I actually agree with Mohammed, and I want to make a comment on this. It's a difficult issue to follow up the donors after a year. Personally, we have like 1,000 donors, but we have never been successful in following them up after even 1 month. It's very difficult. For 1 year, maybe acceptable, but further it's very difficult because there's a belief between the donors. The difference between the kidney donors and the liver donors are kidney donors believe that they lost one of their organs. Liver donors think that it will regenerate and they will have a normal liver again. So they don't think they lost any of their organs, so they don't want to come to follow-up. And I agree, maybe if we follow them 5, 10, 20 years, we can see some less stricture or some other problems. But it's very difficult to say if it's true or not because nobody in the world, I think, can follow them after so long.
I agree with the idea of it and the practicality of it. And I think in your parts of the world, it's a lot more difficult. We actually can find people in the United States based on medical insurance and things like that. And maybe it'll just be that it's a subset of the donors that we're able to follow long-term to see if there are any long-term issues. I think it's very difficult to get donors to come back after a year. I very much agree with you on that.
That's perfect.
I have a short question about donor comorbidity. For example, I had a donor with brain aneurysm, 15 millimeter. And we rejected the donor, but the other center, Kumamoto University, performed their ERT without any problem. And there another donor had the history of gastrectomy 2 years ago for stage 1 gastric cancer. And we did transplant using this donor. And the other one, recent one, is a potential donor had bronchial asthma, treated successfully almost for 20 years without any episode of attack, but we refused. And how do you think about donor comorbidity and how much you can accept such people?
Well, I think those of you who do a lot more living donors than we do in the States can probably push the envelope a little bit more, but I think if we start to do that too much, you get a little too cavalier. I mean, you might get the donor through safely, but what if something bad does happen? So I think that's a difficult question to answer. We probably wouldn't have done the brain aneurysm. We probably would never have done the gastrectomy patient, and we wouldn't have done the one with asthma either. So I think that's where the societal and center-specific experience and what risk you're willing to take and the patients are willing to take comes into play. Mohammed,
Can I say something about that?
of course.
Because we live in a world where there are competing programs. The first example you gave, where you thought that it was risky to do the donor and some other center did it successfully, I don't think you were wrong in that. This is not, absolutely, because you may not accept a 1% risk, and the other center doing it, knowing that there is a 1% risk. I mean, they're going to have a 99% chance that there is going to be nothing. So it just indicates that you are more cautious than the other center, which is a good thing. It's not that they are better than you. So it's always a difficult situation for patients that they will come to one center and they will turn down. It's the same with even GRWR. One center may turn down a GRWR of less than 7, and there may be another center who will do it. It's all about risk-taking. It's not the ability of individual centers.
I think the questions will never end if we stop. So we have to stop now and we continue at the coffee break. Thank you very much.